Life doesn't stop while on vacation. Neither do medical issues, accidents, or worse. We are going to ask the questions others won't, so you can protect yourself and your family.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Shell with Cruise Addicts, and we're here today to talk about shore excursion tragedies and who do you really sue? Of course, sometime you go on a cruise, everything isn't always smooth sailing and things happen. And we've got an expert, Attorney Tom Scolaro, is actually going to tell us about the things that, that happen behind the scenes. You hear about something when you're on a cruise, somebody got hurt, you're not really sure, you see a helicopter, many different things happen, but we don't really always know what really happened, what truly happened, right? So Tom is going to bring us up to date on actually what to do if things do go wrong. And that's really the purpose of these different things that we're doing with Tom. We're actually going to learn what to do if things actually go wrong while you're on a cruise. Unfortunately, we hope they don't, but when they do, you're going to be prepared, and that's what this is all about. We're going to get Tom in here now. Hi, Tom. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for asking, John. Good afternoon.
Yeah, and I know, of course, we're going to talk about shore excursion tragedies. What does that really mean? I mean, it sounds dramatic, right? But like I just said, people are knocking on your door and they're coming in there and you're telling you about things, or you're hearing about it. They're calling you, they're contacting you, I'm sure, even while they're on vacation. What does that really mean for the average cruiser?
Yeah, so this happens more often than not. I mean, cruises are they're all-inclusive, great vacations, but half the fun happens on the ship, but half the fun is all the different excursions that they market and have you participate in, whether it be zip lining or bungee jumping or, cliff jumping, snorkeling, these back sort of country guides, anything and everything. A large part of the activity occurs off the ship.
Right.
And so, and it usually occurs in some foreign jurisdiction. These are not happening for large purposes for U.S. based ports, but they're happening in countries of the Caribbean, countries in Central America, South America, and worldwide, depending on where your cruise departs from. And so there is unfortunately, bad things happen, usually to good people. And when tragedy strikes on the excursion, the ride, the whatever it is, the snorkeling, the slides, whatever it may be, what do you do, right? What do you do in that situation? And so, yeah, I'm happy to talk about all those issues because it happens with a high degree of frequency. Half of what we see generally is what I would call ship-based negligence, ship-based injuries. And the other half of it are shoreside or shore excursion type injuries. And that could, be anything from an injury to a death, unfortunately. And that brings with it a whole series of problems and complications that we'll sort of walk through today.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of things, but does the average consumer or the cruiser have any recourse in those?
Yeah, and you've probably heard this theme throughout, our first few discussions. You're going to have to hire a good lawyer first, because there is no rights or remedies based on the goodwill and good corporate practices of these cruise lines. If something happens to you on a shore excursion that is the fault of the excursion company, or you were severely injured, or family member killed, they'll be nice to you. They'll sort of help you get your bags back to Ohio or wherever, but that's where it ends. If you want any redress, any remedy, any measure of justice, do not look for anybody to just do that out of the willingness of their heart or respond to any sort of, inquiries to settle. Now, you're going to have to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer's going to have to, again, be specialized in maritime law, specialized in this particular area. And then, yes, there are avenues of recovery, but it is harder and more fraught with obstacles and perils than a regular shore or a regular ship-based negligence. Yes.
Right. And of course, everybody that watching, we appreciate it. We're thankful that people watching us live, but we're also thankful that people that watch us when the recordings after. We've noticed that sometimes our schedule doesn't match your schedule, and you might be doing a Google search or a YouTube search, and all of a sudden our video pops up. But we're really thankful. Please give it the like, a subscribe, a thumbs up, and if you're watching live and you have a question for Tom, please put it down below. Put it in the comments. We love to answer it and interact. That's what makes these really special, is these live interactions. So where do we begin first?
So I think a good place to begin is, and it just struck me about 30 seconds ago as I was gearing up for this topic, shore excursions and what do you do and how often does this occur? You'll recall, John, because you're very in tune with this. About 3-4 days ago, it was all over the news that a elderly woman off the coast of Australia was on an excursion doing some hiking on an island, and they left her there. and the excursion company left her there, and she passed away when they went to get her the next day. I don't know anything about the details of how she died, what were the circumstances of that. I don't know any of that. But it's a perfect example of, how something like this comes up. You book an excursion on board, and you believe you're booking it through the cruise line, that it's the cruise line that's sponsoring it, that the cruise line that's offering it, that's the cruise line that's directing it, and that's the cruise line that's responsible for it. Nothing could be further from the truth. They want you to think that, right? They want you to think that to get you to purchase it and to get you to, engage in all of these things. But buried within the fine print of the contract with the excursion is they disclaim liability. They claim that they have no control over this entity, that it's a different entity altogether. It's an independent contractor, that they're not liable for the acts or omissions of an independent contractor, that in short, you're on your own. And no one thinks that, right? You're buying it on board the cruise ship under their umbrella, their mantra. They're sponsoring it. They're making money off of it, right?
Right.
But the way the documents read and how they have these things structured, it's layered. So there's really this disclaimer of responsibility and accountability. So when something like this happens to that poor woman in Australia and her family, they're left to, try and assert their claims, number one, against the excursion companies. And then number two, you can try and make your claims against the cruise line, but there are obstacles to that. And there's obstacles going against the excursion company as well. And I can sort of touch on some of these, but the big picture is, let's assume we're talking about an excursion company and they do something wrong. They're responsible. They drive off a cliff. They do something, terrible that injures or maims people. Wherever you want to sue them in the United States, in the Southern District of Florida, most likely, where you'd be bringing your claims against the cruise line, you have to also assert and establish that you can obtain a personal jurisdiction over this excursion company, that somehow this excursion company has availed itself and has done business in the U.S. so that they're subject to being hauled into court to account for their wrongs. Now, it sounds so easy when I just said it, but in practice, they too try and minimize their contacts with Florida. They usually have their business set up in the foreign country, whether it be Belize or Bahamas or Jamaica or wherever. They do not incorporate here. They generally do not have offices here. They don't have registered agents here. They generally don't market here. But a lot of the way to approach that, we have found in our practice, is you really have to engage in a lot of homework beforehand, number one, and try and find anything and everything you can that establishes a relationship between them and that particular cruise line. How tight is their business relationship? How often, have they engaged in these contracts? Is there any cross marketing? there's a lot that goes into try and do that. You want to try and generally do that before you file a lawsuit, because we have heightened pleading requirements here in Florida now. So you can't just say, they are subject to jurisdiction. Okay. It's not enough. You have to essentially prove it before you file your case. In the event you can't do that, we would ask the court for leave, meaning let's take a timeout before we address the merits of this motion, and let us conduct jurisdictional discovery. Like, let us focus and take some discovery on the limited issues about their ties to the state of Florida, and their business relationships. So sometimes we can do that in a way to establish jurisdiction over them in the U.S., which is paramount because, they're the main responsible entity, and you want to be able to have them account for what they did wrong. Part and parcel of that is, of course, you want to bring suit against the cruise line as well. Again, because they're the ones that everybody believes is the real party behind this. They're the ones profiting off of it. They're the ones representing the excursion for the cruise line. They're the ones, taking your money, and they're the ones that everybody believes has vetted and, is accounting for these people.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm guessing as far as if you had if you went to the court and say, listen, my client wouldn't have gotten hurt due to the negligence of this third party if they hadn't have, they were the conduit to connect this, to book this excursion through.
Yeah.
And of course, we thought it was them, through, the original cruise line, right?
Correct. And unfortunately, that alone, what you just said there, isn't enough. You would think,
Right.
Again, you would think it is because that's who we believe, or that's who, the traveling public believes that they are, engaging with. They believe, pick the cruise line, Carnival, Royal, NCL, doesn't matter. They believe that, no. What do you mean it's Joe's, Joe's snorkeling company? I don't have a contract with them. I got a contract with Carnival Cruise Lines. And no one reads the fine print. They just don't. Who's going to do that? But no, the contract documents usually spell out that they're an independent contractor, and the law on independent contractors are generally that you're not responsible for the acts of an independent contractor unless you exercise control over them, the means and methods by which they go about their business. So when we are faced with a situation like this, John, where a client sustains a horrible set of injuries because of the negligence of the excursion company, there are theories that the court has allowed and found to be valid in the case of establishing liability on behalf for these types of situations. Number one would be what we call negligent selection or negligent retention. What does that mean? That means that, the cruise line never should have selected this particular operator because this particular operator has a history of safety deficiencies. They have a history of accidents in its, roster. They have a history of complaints. They've got a history of problems, either before you were ever selected to offer this excursion on our cruise ship for our customers, or during the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year relationship, that there's been all these problems, and they never should have retained them to offer this service. They should have used, instead of Joe's snorkeling service, they should have used Larry's snorkeling service, because Larry's got a better record. And so negligent selection, negligent retention is a viable cause of action to utilize when we're dealing with trying to establish cruise line liability for shore excursions. Because again, it goes back to, what is the cruise line's duty, right? They have a duty to exercise reasonable care. And in this case, it means reasonable care in selecting and monitoring the excursion operator. You can't just bury your head if you've got an operator who is, shorting safety, if you've got an operator who is, have got complaints before. And this information is not hard to find. It's through shows like yours and others that people talk about, oh, I had this experience. This was great. This was bad. And so all of that information is out there. It's out there for the public, and it's certainly out there for the cruise lines to gauge, and for them to understand, hey, do we need to do anything with regard to this particular vendor? And that, that leads into not just selecting and retaining them, but they should also audit them. And they should also participate in the excursion as well, from time to time, sort of like the secret shopper thing, if you will, right? I mean, again, because it's the prudent, right thing to do when you have guests who do not understand these situations. They're not familiar with the form. They're not familiar with anything like that. So it's an opportunity for the cruise line to exercise their reasonable care. So, negligent selection, negligent retention is one avenue that helps find redress for customers or passengers that are gravely injured.
And I imagine we're kind of talking about the same thing regularly with this, but I'm sure someone has a problem on the ship or on the cruise. Something happens ashore. They may or may not get seen, on the scene of the excursion, because like we talked about, and I've been blessed to travel, there's not a lot of resources or medical care in a lot of these far off places. They might be beautiful, but sometimes it's really kind of third world, to say the least, as far as what the quality of care that you're going to get. So I'm guessing a lot of times they get sent back to the ship, right? Then they get to the infirmary, and then they just maybe do the best they can there. And if they're stable enough, they come home all patched up to some degree, maybe pre-surgery, and I bring this up because we did a group cruise a while back, and I think I mentioned it previously. And sure enough, we had a big enough group. Someone got hurt. They were on a zip line when the zip lines were kind of new, which was the new thing. Mm-hmm. And the person went down the zip line and went right into a tree, and mm-hmm. their leg was injured, and it was significant. And they wrapped it up, and we're like, "How are you doing? What's going on?" And they're like, "Yeah, she was hobbling around, and she was going to have to go home and get surgery." But I don't know how safe that is. I'm not a doctor, of course, but can you imagine that you've got a fracture or major injury, and now you're in some third world type country? It was beautiful, it was fun, but now you have to go home, and hopefully you got good insurance and you can get it done at your local hospital. But I also know that sometimes that injury might be trying to heal, right? So all of a sudden, how many days out are you from getting surgery, right? And so there's a lot of complications that could happen there, I'm sure. But yeah, so things happen, and it just makes me wonder, like, it's like we talked about so many times. You go to these places, and like I said, I love them just like many other people do, but there's so many risks with it, right?
Oh, yeah. And listen, everything was fine until I broke my leg.
It was great. They were passing out free rum punch,
I had a great time until, and it's like, yeah, you can't, it's funny, like you can't anticipate all that can go wrong, but you talk to somebody like me, I get scared the bejesus out of you, and I don't want to do that to people. I want people to have a nice, fun life, but when bad things happen, just be ready. But no, these things happen with regularity, John. You'd be surprised. And to your point, it's compounded because it's not like Mount Sinai Hospital is a 15-minute drive away, and you have the same EMS people running to your scene with lights and sirens on. It ain't like that at all.
Not at all.
Okay. And I'll say this, you don't want to end up in some hospital, someplace like that, or some clinic. It's not going to be a hospital. It's not often, but it's rare that one of these shore excursion type massive injuries that I'm talking about or death occur in a major city. Okay. It happens, but for the most part, these are very small ports, where at most you're talking, there's a clinic around someplace. So you do want to try and get back on board, because from there, fingers crossed, and assuming everything goes right, they will be able to marshal better medical care for you, meaning stabilize you, and hopefully, if appropriate, get you, some sort of arrangements to real shoreside medical care, be that, a true trauma hospital in a foreign country, or if need be, redirect the ship to such that where you can get an actual port or an airport to fly back to Fort Lauderdale or to Miami and get real care. But I'll tell you, it's happened where it's been a double whammy, where I've seen it where there's been a bad excursion type of injury, and that's followed by bad medical care on board. I can think of one case off the top of my head. It wasn't that it was a bad excursion. Let me preface that. A gentleman that I represented was doing, they were doing cliff jumping in, I want to say it was Jamaica. And, it was one of those things where you start off, at it's called the baby jump. And then you progressively get higher and higher and higher. So it was the end of the day, and they were on the highest rock to jump, and the rest of the family did. And he jumped off, and immediately upon contact with the water, he knew something was wrong with his eye. It was just like blurry all of a sudden. Something happened. He's like, something's not right. A couple hours later, just the rest of the day, just something's not right. So he goes to the medical center. And he says, "Look, something's wrong with my eye. I just did this jumping." "Oh, no, you're fine." Didn't even give him an eye exam. Turns out, he ended up, when he jumped, he tore his retina, and because he did not get adequate medical care on board within a certain time window, the tear essentially migrated to his central vision, and he lost a good deal of vision in his whatever eye it was, right or left, I don't remember. And he had to go, when he finally got back home, he had to have emergency surgery. And the way they do that is crazy. They gave him this surgery called the Scolaro buckle, not Scolaro buckle, where they had this surgery and they had like a gas bubble in his eye. He had to lay face down for 7 days. Face down, in order for the procedure to take. I've never heard of anything so crazy, but it didn't take great. He ended up having altered vision the rest of his life. A young guy from his early 40s, all because again, the medical care on board is not going to be the world's best. And again, one of these themes that I've been making in all of these talks that had is you have to be your best advocate. You cannot take no for an answer. You got to listen to your gut. If you believe something is wrong, you need to say something. You just don't sit there and be quiet. Raise holy hell, raise a stink. Okay. Get yourself off that vessel if you need to. Figure out a way to get back to the States, get to a hospital, but exercise care for yourself, because they're not always doing the best for you. So keep that in mind.
So let's go back to the scenario as far as that gentleman goes. Obviously something happened, and it could be anybody on a short excursion. What's the best thing to do? Because I'm sure that what happens is, all of a sudden, hey, what happened to you? I heard it, and people, we talked about this before. People downplay things, right?
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you got to see a specialist or whoever. When you finally get to some expert authority that knows what they're looking at, and they say, well, you're in bad shape here. This is significant. You're going to have some special surgery. You could lose your eyesight, and multiply it times all the scenarios that you see regularly. What's the due course of process here, or steps I'm trying to say here, to take before, during, and in case something happens, right?
Well, I would say it all obviously depends on the severity of the situation. First and most important thing is, making sure that you get adequate medical care. And sometimes that's not possible. I can think of one case where we had a bus rollover. This family went on one of these excursions. I forget the company and I forget the name and I forget the country, but I do remember it was a rollover. I want to think maybe it was Antigua, and one of these old Unimog, which is an old, like, I don't know who makes it, Russian, 4 tires very close together. It's not a very stable vehicle. It rolled. It had a rollover on these back roads threw out the people from the vehicle, of serious injuries and a death. In a situation like that, I mean, that's just a major emergency. The only thing you can do from that is pray to get yourself to a hospital, and that's most important. But let's talk about the less severe type of cases, which happen with more regularity than the severe ones. I would tell you, number one, again, get yourself back on board as opposed to medical care in some, podunk clinic. Document everything. Take pictures of the condition that caused the issue on the excursion. Everybody's got a cell phone. Take it out and snap some pictures. Use it. Hit record. Okay. Get people making statements. Take pictures. Do you see any staff members around? Anybody like that? Record. Document. And then again, when you get to the cruise ship, same thing. And you get to the infirmary, same thing. Document, record, tell security. But again, the prevailing thing should be your safety and your medical care.
Right. So I tell you what, does it, I've got a few questions here.
Sure.
Let's see. Is it better to book shore excursions through the cruise line, or is it any different if you do it through a third party? Because there's a lot of options now with that weren't prevalent before.
Through the cruise line. Okay. Because if you do it through a third party vendor, or if you do it through the excursion company itself, you are making any potential claim against the cruise line much more difficult. Again, the whole idea when we're trying to establish liability for the cruise line is establish that you believed and thought that you were really booking a quote unquote carnival or NCL or royal excursion. So when you're doing it through them, that is ample factual evidence that is part of that. So I would absolutely go through the cruise line. Number one. Number two, you don't quite know who you're giving your personal information to when you use a third-party vendor. I'd avoid that at all costs, especially some of these ones that are in foreign jurisdictions. They don't play by the same rules with your information that others do.
Yeah, and of course, the other thing, there are big shore excursion companies that, they do, and it is a little bit cheaper, or it's a more elaborate of an excursion. You get the, more perks, as far as maybe more time, or maybe it includes a lunch where the cruise line one might not have as many frills. Mm-hmm. But also people say, okay, well, I'm just going to book directly. I'm going to get off the ship and I'm going to find someone, or I'm going to do something directly. Now, we can call anywhere for the same price pretty much. So you can reach out directly with people. So, it is kind of complicated, but I totally get what you're saying. And if I understand what you're saying, right, by doing it through the cruise line, it gives another party that's part of the whole thing. So if there is a complaint or a concern, you have more parties to kind of reach out to rectify it in some way.
Yeah, that and if God forbid something happens, right?
Right.
That is a fact that we can use, that the court can consider in terms of whether or not this was really the cruise line that should be responsible for this. Because remember, there's and that'll lead me into this. There's other ways other than negligent selection and negligent retention to try and hold the cruise line liable for, the disasters that occur with excursions. One is, a failure to warn, which we can talk about later. But another one is one of the stronger workaround is apparent agency. That's a workaround to the independent contractor defense, because really your argument at that point is that the cruise line represented that the excursion operator was really its agent, and that the passenger reasonably relied upon that representation and, somehow, change their position to the detriment. You can use the cruise line's marketing materials, the logos, uniforms, onboard sales practices to prove this. So apparent agency, who you think you are, booking this excursion through and who you believe is operating it, matters in these contexts. Because again, the default rule is that cruise lines are not responsible for the excursion company's negligence. That's the default rule. So you have to, find a cause of action around that. That's negligent selection, that's negligent retention, that's failure to warn, or things like apparent agency, or you can make an argument about actual agency or joint venture, things of that negligent misrepresentation, all ways, possibly around the default rule, if you will, in those situations.
Right. And then, when you do these types of excursions, especially something that's a little more dangerous, it could be ATVs or zip lining. The first thing that comes out with the big group, they get everybody together, give you a safety briefing of some type. And then sure enough, here it comes, be either electronic or otherwise, you're filling out paperwork where you're signing on the bottom line with your name and information saying, some type of writing off your liability to the company, right? You're saying I'm responsible.
Well, that's one of the things that they will try and do, is get you to waive liabilities in these situations. But anybody that practices maritime law knows that those pre-incident waivers are unenforceable in maritime law. There's actually a U.S. code law right on point that does not allow them to disclaim their liability. So it doesn't stop them trying,
Right.
But it won't have it won't have legal effect, again, assuming you know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. So now, what type of scenarios or situations have you seen as far as different cases that have come across your desk that you could share with us?
Well, the ones that come to mind are, like I said, there was ones where you're going on some sort of off-country ride of some sort, whether that be ATV, horseback, some sort of all-terrain type of vehicle like a Unimog. These roads are not our roads. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it with buses. I've seen, people involved in an accident, a bus where the bus damn near went off a mountain and, caused a massive tragedy. But any sort of transportation, be careful. Again, their vehicles are not as safe as ours. Their roads certainly are not as safe. And I'm going to bet dollars to donuts their drivers probably aren't as safe as you and I are either, right? So you got to factor all these things in. And I don't know about you. A lot of people, when they go on vacations, they go something like this and they take a little ride someplace. A lot of people, especially when they jump in the back seat, they don't buckle up. They just don't do it. I don't know psychologically why that is. Well, they'll buckle up if they're driving, or they'll buckle up if they're, in the front seat. But a lot of people in the back don't buckle up.
You're right. Yeah.
One day I'll figure out the psychology behind that. I can't answer that question right now, but I would tell people, buckle up. I don't care if you're in the back. Okay. And if there's no seatbelt in there, understand that you have an option. You don't have to go on that excursion. You don't have to go on that ride. I wouldn't do it. Okay, fine. I lost $40 or whatever it is. I'll go do something else. So transportation is a big one. Anything involving the water is another one that we see a lot of. I've been involved in parasailing excursion accidents, drowning excursion cases, jet ski excursion cases. Just imagine, what can go wrong on the water has. Again, you got people acting a little bit reckless on vacation. Alcohol's sometimes a factor. People are lax with rules. They're not familiar with the equipment that they're operating, and it happens. And I've seen other things. I've seen boat propeller injuries. That's not a good one. I've got one going right now like that I can't talk too much about, but that's a terrible situation. And God, I'm trying to think what else off the top of my head. And you've look, I'll give you a crazy one. And I wasn't involved in this case. A number of years ago, I forget, maybe 4, 5 years ago. And I forget the cruise line. I want to say it was Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, again, operating out of, I think it was a cruise off the coast of New Zealand or something like that. There in White Mountain or White Volcano, there's supposedly some dormant volcano that they took an excursion to, led by a local company. And there was some indicia of increased activity. Of course, there was no warning provided, as I understand it, to the passengers, and I believe that was the theory that they were traveling under, is that they did not give the cruise line did not give its passengers a warning about the increased level of activity of the volcano. You may be wondering, well, what theory could you hold for a volcano that erupts? Well, that would be one, that the cruise line could and should have understood that if they're going to, take its passengers and offer them an excursion on a active volcano, even though it hadn't, spewed in decades, if there is some indicia of increased activity, you should probably pass that information on to your guests and give them the opportunity to say yay or nay to the excursion. So that's when I'm talking about one of the possible ways around the general default rule, John, is a failure to warn. So a cruise line has a duty to warn passengers of known dangers in places they are invited to visit. It's not limited to dangers on board. It extends to the shore sites if the cruise line knew or should have known about them. And there's some case law on point to this. And so you can take that line of thought and say, okay, well, if the cruise line knows about a particular series of dangers in one stop, that they've been having issues with crime, or an issue, where their passengers have been, targeted, that's information that needs to find its way to the passengers. And if you don't, the cruise line can be held liable for that. So to sort of review a little bit, and I feel like I'll summarize a little bit, negligent selection, negligent retention, failure to warn, apparent agency, those are negligent misrepresentation. Those are ways to potentially get around this default rule. With regard to negligent representation, liability in a situation like that attaches when the cruise line markets the excursion as safe or cruise approved, if you will, while knowing that there's some safety concerns otherwise. So in cases like that, we utilize a lot of their promotional materials to see what they are saying to passengers to entice them to book. Right. And in light of, okay, well, what are those complaints that are out there on that topic?
So it's interesting you were talking about that volcano. So just to recap in my mind, these people were on an excursion that went to this dormant volcano. It was a beautiful island, I believe, in some tropical place, and it was a beautiful sunny day out. And then there's no warning to be anywhere. And I think there's a documentary out there. I'm sure you can look it up. They went there, and all of a sudden, the volcano became active, and I think a lot of people perished.
A lot of people died, and those that survived. Again, I don't know the case. I'm not familiar with it, but I do know that a lot of the ones that survived were burned terribly.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, I'm listening to you talk about this, and it's all coming back to me a little bit. And then I think, every place I've been to in the last couple of years that had a volcano in a 50-mile radius, it's been offered as a tour. So, think it's in the Caribbean, it could be in Italy, it could be anywhere. They want to get you to as close as they can to that volcano and charge you some money to look at it. And here we are, and me and you both might be lined up. I don't know, but it's just a real thing, that this could happen. And
it is, yeah.
It's okay.
I was going to say, to your point, it's like you're very astute. Like whatever they can monetize in a location, they will monetize.
Yeah.
Whether it be, driving down some weird roads, or going on a beach, or going near a volcano, or jumping into a lake. You can monetize anything these days. Yeah. And I will give them credit. Good old American way. They are expert at it, right? Oh, yeah. Hats off to them. And look, a lot of people are into that, not me, but a lot of people are. And it's okay. The vast majority of the time, everything's fine, everything's safe, but not always, right? And right. So what do you do in those situations? You know, it's tough.
So I got to put you on the spot if you don't mind.
Sure.
So if I were just to ask you, we're sitting down, what excursion would you absolutely not ever take for yourself? Like, just do not do this.
Well, I would certainly never go on anything that involved transport. Okay. I wouldn't. If I'm not driving the vehicle, I ain't doing it. Okay. That's kind of my default rule.
Okay.
If I'm ever going to, knock on wood, but if I'm ever going to die in an auto accident or something like that, it's because I screwed up. Okay. I do not want to be a hapless victim. I don't want to be like, there's nothing I could do. I was a passenger. No, I don't. I just not me. I'm a control issues, as you can tell, many issues in life, but that's one of them. So no, I won't do anything that involves me giving control of a vehicle to somebody in less than ideal situations. That would be my line in the sand. I would do the other things. I would, anything involving water activities and things of that nature. I feel like I can handle myself in the water. I feel like I can, do most things. And I probably wouldn't. Here's another you get out on the list. I wouldn't do shark feeding.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've seen a lot of because
Yes.
everybody's got their phones out nowadays. They're filming it, and there's Mary's getting chewed on, or something. It's awful.
I've been contacted on cases like shark biting and I'm just, I look at him like, boy, you can see this is going to go wrong almost from the title of it. Come and feed the sharks.
Bad.
No. I watched Jaws when I was a kid, and I am sufficiently scared, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. So
we learned that lesson back in the day, right?
those things I won't do. No, anything. But notice there's like a theme: a wild animal or anything where I don't have control over. I'm generally not going to do.
So I thought you were going to say like the stereotypical parasailing, no, that's what I kind of thought that. I thought that's what you might say. But.
Well, yes, I'm going to say no on that one too, because am I driving the boat? No. And I've seen, oh God, I'm like the world's worst guest because I got all these horror stories.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible dinner guest, but I was involved in a case a number of years ago in Key West where it is not a cruise ship case, but it was a parasailing case. So a young couple, they just gotten engaged, were visiting from Texas, and they went to Key West to do a parasailing trip, and the weather was such that day. It was crystal clear, beautiful, perfect. But there was a storm coming.
Oh no.
Okay. And they got all the data you needed on, I forget what the app was called, but it was all there for him to see. And they go like 4 miles off the shore. They thought they were away from the weather, and a squall came up and lifted them so high it almost flipped the boat that they were attached to. And after the violence of how they got caught in the wind, it slammed them down. I forget from what height, 100, 200 feet, with such force to the ocean floor, to the ocean. It just one guy, the boyfriend died on impact. Oh, the young girl, she lived for about 6 months. But there was no signs of it.
So true tragedy.
It was terrible. It was terrible. And so all because all of the other, because there's a lot of parasailing in Key West, all of the other operators, when they saw the warnings, they went in. Okay? Not this knucklehead. This knucklehead decided, you know what? I can get one in. Right. And that's the thing is you give yourself up to people and trust that they are professionals and they know what they're doing. But you don't know their risk tolerance. You don't know how risk averse they are. Right. You don't know what he's got going on in his life. You don't know if he's a cowboy. Right. So, again, those things where I don't want to give up control. Now, when I was a younger man, right, and I thought I was Superman and invincible, and I coincidentally too stupid to know otherwise, I probably would have done those things.
Right.
But having been engaged in this practice long enough and understanding that the human condition is fallible, right? I mean, all it takes is one bad decision, 1 second of inattention, and your life is inextricably altered forever. For what? For what? To take a selfie that I was, on a parasail or something like that. I just made the decision it's not worth it for me. But to each their own. We live in a free country. God bless. 99% of the time, it's going to be fine. It's just, I don't like playing with them. I don't even like them odds.
So someone's watching this, Tom, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years down the line, and they've searched up shore excursion tragedies, and God forbid something awful's happened to someone they love or a friend and they want to reach out to you. We've got your information down below. But how do they contact you, and why should they contact you? We've covered this in previous ones, but we're talking to people that just hadn't heard about you, or hadn't watched anything else. What's the best course of action? How they should contact you, and why should they reach out to you quickly after something happens?
Sure. I'll give you a few ways to contact me. Really, it's just go to cruiseinjury.law is the site. Cruiseinjury.law. I always say not .com because I don't practice commerce here. I practice law. And you can email me at tom@usinjury.law. And I'm happy to talk to you. But why should you? And if it's not me, it needs to be somebody else. You need to get with a specialist, somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to maritime law, cruise ship law, and excursion law. And that is generally speaking going to be somebody who lives and practices in South Florida. Because again, most of these cases have to be brought here. We do this day in and day out. And so if you're from Massachusetts or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, it doesn't matter. You can't look to a lawyer in your jurisdiction or your venue to fix this for you. You only have 6 months to put the cruise line on notice that you're going to make a claim. And then you only have 1 year from the date of the incident to get your lawsuit filed. And the issue is you can't wait until the last minute, because the way the courts have been ruling is you must conduct extensive investigation beforehand in order to file your lawsuit. You can't, just at the last second decide to file a lawsuit, because it'll get dismissed. If it is not factually supported with, detailed factual allegations with detailed factual notice, it's going to get bounced, and you're going to be, up the creek without a paddle. So get with a cruise line lawyer like myself, or somebody that knows what they're doing in this field, because the clock is ticking on your rights. And if it's an excursion type case in particular, okay, again, a few things here. Number one, you have 2 targets that you need to go after. You need to go after the excursion company itself, because look, they're going to have insurance. The cruise lines require, if you're going to do business with them, that you have insurance and that you provide defense and indemnity to them. But that's never going to be enough. You want the excursion company, and you want the cruise line, because you're going to have challenges with both. You may not be able to get jurisdiction on the excursion company. Then what? If you didn't sue the cruise line, then what? So you have to sue both, and you have to understand that you have to get very particular information with regard to the excursion company to satisfy the jurisdiction issues, and you're going to have and get and ascertain enough information from the cruise lines to develop information to get around the default rule. And remember, the default rule is that the cruise lines are not responsible for what they call independent contractors, even though you and I both know they're not really independent contractors. So you have to develop evidence to establish negligent selection, negligent retention, a failure to warn. You have to develop evidence about apparent agency or actual agency, and evidence about negligent misrepresentation. All things that can and should be done by your attorney in prosecuting those types of claims, John.
Right. Now, while you were talking about it, I'm thinking, your firm must have amazing investigators and resources, and of course experience in doing these things. A firm outside of that jurisdiction or just doesn't handle this wouldn't have those resources and wouldn't even know where to look at first. They could totally spin their wheels in that short amount of time, right? Can you tell us about your investigators? And
Yeah, so I operate off of, I have a very good local Miami investigator who is in tune and in touch and has contacts throughout the Caribbean. And so as opposed to me trying to source a local investigator in, say, Belize, for example, my guy here, he's got the contacts through, and he has it through people who have gone through the FBI training academy. He'll know the people to use on the ground. And so I work with him. And, it's good to have somebody who's liaising with my investigators down there. So you want a good investigative team that you can't gather the information without that.
Right, and that's what sets you apart from the other firms. And like you said, that's what you're getting when you go to someone that does this every day.
Yes.
And those intangible things, in the short term, can get to your case built up and have the evidence to show negligence.
Yeah, I mean, look, on cases like this that we've been talking about today, there's a huge spend on the front end by firms like mine. I've got to do a lot of investigation, a lot of, data collection, and they just don't give that to you. You gotta go out and get it and pay for it. And so, you can't do these cases on the cheap. You can't do them, hoping that they'll settle. You have to take every case as if it's a war, every case as if it's going to trial. And you have to put all your time, effort, energy, and resources behind it. Because if you don't, you're going to get pedestrian results or knocked out of court. And I'm just not interested in that.
They just try to lowball, like, can you, like, here, give you basic.
Yeah, look, cruise lines are not stupid. They have teams of lawyers working for them. They know, and because some of my friends are maritime defense lawyers. They know who are the good lawyers and who are not. And if they don't know who you are, they're going to run you crazy. And deservedly so. You shouldn't get involved in this particular area of law unless you're ready to do it for long. Like, look, John, I don't do offshore oil rig explosions. I don't know how to do those, right? There are expert lawyers out there who do. Okay.
Right.
If I ever came in contact with one of those cases, I wouldn't try and do it myself. I'd send it to somebody who has previously done offshore oil rig explosion cases, right? So that's the same thing with maritime law and cases like this and excursions. There's so many hurdles, and the law is very nuanced. And if you're not careful, and this happens, if you're not careful, you're going to make bad law for the rest of us. And we, as a maritime bar here in South Florida, we have to deal with that issue where there are certain lawyers who just continuously either take bad cases, don't prepare them, don't argue them well, or just for a variety of reasons, get beaten, and they make bad law for the rest of us. And that just something I find unforgivable.
Sure. I imagine if you get case law, not in favor of the industry on your side, all of a sudden it's a hurdle that you have to deal with the rest of your career, right?
It is until the right case comes along where we can show that result was reached improperly, or that was not the right one. Because once there's an order out there and a line of cases, that's precedent. So the precedent can affect future cases moving forward.
Are there a lot of attorneys trying to go into this industry that aren't prepared, kind of like what you're talking about? Are there people trying to dip their foot into this pond?
Yeah,
really...
Unfortunately, I've seen that. And I don't know why. I don't know whether there's a lack of business for them otherwise, but certain people are are doing that and trying to say that they're, the bee's knees on this, and you look at them like, come again? Like, I know who you are. No, but again, it all shows in the results, right?
Right.
If you're getting your clock cleaned or you're getting your cases dismissed, there's a reason. And if you're getting good results, there's also a reason. So I just tell people, like not all cars are created equal. Not all lawyers are created equal either. There's a difference between, a Rolls Royce, and a Toyota Corolla.
Right.
And there's just a difference. But and it's the same. It's funny, both cars will get you to the same place, but they don't cost the same. But with lawyers, they cost the same, right? Our fees are what they are. They don't go up or down. But you land at a different spot though.
So I've got a couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap this up. I think we're getting to the top of the hour. Would travel insurance, should someone have travel insurance? Would it help, if something were to happen?
100%. And thanks for reminding me, because we usually talk about that as an important factor when you go on cruises. And I'm a big fan of travel insurance. It will help get you off the vessel faster. It will help get you off the vessel cheaper. It will speed up the process by which you receive your medical care. And for God's sakes, you won't be left having to mortgage your house at the end of the day. It's a little bit of an add-on, okay? But immensely worth it. Immensely worth it.
And my question too do they still cover you during these shore excursion situations?
Yes. The vast majority of them. I haven't seen any that don't.
Okay.
They will cover you for all this, and it's a specialized market, travel insurance, for the specialized risks and the geographical areas in which things can go wrong and haywire. So that it's a perfect product for somebody traveling on a cruise, because it will pay for the medical care in a foreign jurisdiction.
And as far as, do you think they should always have medical evacuation insurance where they can get some home?
Yes.
Someone home?
Yeah. I mean, you're never going to hear me say no about that, because so much of what I'm involved in usually starts with the story is, they wouldn't let me off the bus. I couldn't get off the vessel. It was delayed, this or whatever. So if you have, the medical evacuation insurance, it's just going, then there's no reason. There's no reason not to get you off the vessel. And remember, it's your life. No one's going to look after you like you. So if your health and safety is worth an extra, $40, pay for it.
Right. And then my final question is, some luxury lines and also river cruise lines have tours included. And they can, a lot of times they're walking tours, so they're not over extravagant, but sometimes you have to get on buses and there's things. And of course there might be other things that they do as well. Is there anything difference there as far as shore excursion wise?
No, a lot of those are actually more tied into the cruise line, as opposed to ones that are operated separately. So more of those river cruises, for example, their tours are much more organized, they're much more tied into the cruise line, and even operated by certain cruise lines. So there is a distinction there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. So I guess the last thing to say is we've covered a lot of different things. We've learned about what to do. We've learned about some of these crazy situations that have happened, and how you really do have to look after yourself. There's no golden parachute here that's going to happen, if something were to happen. You always have to look after yourself. Is there something we haven't covered yet that you'd like to share before we leave?
In the world of excursions that I can think of, no, other than, be your advocate on the ground if and when something happens. Although we probably did discuss this, but remember, if you end up bringing a case in the U.S., getting access to information is much easier right then and there than if you try and do it 2 months later. Okay, so document, photograph, whatever you can, because ascertaining information, witnesses, everything is going to be much, much harder later on.
I'm guessing too, you're on the scene and you're with ABC Excursion Company. You might want to take a picture of the logo on the side of the vehicle or whatever, maybe some patch, so you have some type of evidence that you were there with that company at that time. Because people are like, I don't know who he is. He wasn't on our trip, you know.
Everybody and anything. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. And can you also share one more time how to contact you to ask you some questions?
Sure.
So people can reach out to you.
Yep. You can go to our website, cruiseinjury.law, or if you want to just correspond with me myself, my phone is always attached to me. So send me an email at Tom at usinjury.law, LAW. I'm happy to answer anybody's questions.
And we've got a fancy QR code now on the screen. All you have to do is take your phone out and point it at the QR code, and Tom's website will pull right up. It's very informative. And of course, you can have them for the future. We're doing all these. We hope that nothing ever happens. But we want you to be prepared. Like you said, God forbid something does happen, you know who to contact. You can call up Tom, email him 24/7, and he can let you know how he can help you if he needs to help you. And we hope he doesn't. I've got Tom's number. I hope I don't have to call him, but at least I know I'm in good hands because I've learned so much. And thank you again, Tom, for sharing so much about all these wonderful things and taking a deep dive for our viewers. And so until then, thank you again, and we'll catch you all next time. Be safe.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Tom. Bye-bye.